Hello dear friends. Yes, everyone knows these drinks are native from a hot dry country, which is made from who would we think cacti, or rather blue. And yes, we are talking about tequila in Mexico. Today I want to tell you and show rare historical photos of this country. 1913. In the wake of a series of bloody riots in the streets of Mexico City in February 1913, Madero is overthrown by a coup led by his own military chief, General Victoriano Huerta. Huerta declares himself dictator and has Madero murdered, but opposition from the supporters of Villa, Zapata and the former Diaz ally but political moderate Venustiano Carranza drive Huerta to resign by 1914. Carranza takes power, and Zapata and Villa continue waging war against him. Various invasions by the United States nervous about their unruly neighbor further complicates matters, as Carranza struggles to hold power. Government forces led by General Alvaro Obregón finally defeat Villa's northern guerrilla forces, leaving the rebel leader wounded but alive. 1917. Mexico remains neutral throughout World War I, despite efforts by Germany to enlist the country as an ally. Despite the warring factions in Mexico, Carranza is able to oversee the creation of a new liberal Mexican constitution in 1917. In his efforts to maintain power, however, Carranza grows increasingly reactionary, ordering the ambush and murder of Zapata in 1919. Some of Zapata's followers refuse to believe their hero is dead, and his legend lives on to inspire many generations of social reformers. The following year, Carranza is overthrown and killed by a group of his more radical generals. They are led by Obregón, who is elected president and faces the task of reforming Mexico after 10 years of devastating revolution. By this time, nearly 900,000 Mexicans have emigrated to the United States since 1910, both to escape the violence and to find greater opportunities for work. After 3 years, the U.S. recognizes the Obregón government, only after the Mexican leader promises not to seize the holdings of American oil companies in Mexico. In domestic affairs, Obregón puts into place a series of agrarian reforms and gave official sanction to organizations of peasants and laborers. He also institutes a sweeping educational reform led by José Vasconcelos, enabling the Mexican Cultural Revolution that begins during this period, including astonishing work by such artists as Diego Rivera and Frida Kahlo, the photographer Tina Medati, the composer Carlos Chavez, and the writers Martin Louis Guzman and Juan Rulfo to extend from the richest to the poorest segments of the population. After stepping down in 1924 to make way for another former general, Plutarco Calles, Obregón is re-elected in 1928, but is killed this same year by a religious fanatic. Rebuilding the nation. 1934. Lázaro Cárdenas, another former revolutionary general, is elected president. He revives the Revolutionary-era social revolution and carries out an extensive series of agrarian reforms, distributing nearly twice as much land to peasants as had all of his predecessors combined. In 1938, Cárdenas nationalizes the country's oil industry, expropriating the extensive properties of foreign-owned companies and creating a government agency to administer the oil industry. He remains an influential figure in government throughout the next 3 decades. 1940. Elected in 1940, Cárdenas' more conservative successor, Manuel Avila Camacho, forges a friendlier relationship with the U.S., which leads Mexico to declare war on the Axis powers after the Japanese bombing of Pearl Harbor. During World War II, Mexican pilots fight against Japanese forces in the Philippines, serving alongside the U.S. Air Force. In 1944, Mexico agrees to pay U.S. oil companies $24 million, plus interest, for properties expropriated in 1938. The following year, Mexico joins the newly created United Nations. 1946. Miguel Alemán becomes the first civilian president of Mexico since Francisco Madero in 1911. In the post-World War II years, Mexico undergoes great industrial and economic growth, even as the gap continues to grow between the richest and poorest segments of the population. The ruling government party, founded in 1929, is renamed the Partido Revolucionario Institucional (PRI) and will continue its dominance for the next 50 years. PRI in power. 1968. As a symbol of its growing international status, Mexico City is chosen to host the Olympic Games. Over the course of the year, student protesters stage a number of demonstrations in an attempt to draw international attention to what they see as a lack of social justice and democracy in Mexico under the PRI government and its current president, Gustavo Díaz Ordaz. On October 2, 10 days before the games were to open, Mexican security forces and military troops surround a demonstration at the historic Tlatelolco Plaza and open fire. Though the resulting death and injury toll is concealed by the Mexican government and their allies in Washington, at least 100 people are killed and many others wounded. The games go ahead as planned. 1976. Huge oil reserves are discovered in the Bay of Campeche, off the shores of the states of Campeche, Tabasco and Veracruz, at the southernmost end of the Gulf of Mexico. The Cantarell oil field established there becomes one of the largest in the world, producing more than 1 million barrels per day by 1981. José López Portillo, elected in 1976, promises to use the oil money to fund a campaign of industrial expansion, social welfare and high-yield agriculture. To do this, his government borrows huge sums of foreign money at high interest rates, only to discover that the oil is generally of low grade. These policies leave Mexico with the world's largest foreign debt. 1985. By the mid-1980s, Mexico is in financial crisis. On September 19, 1985, an earthquake in Mexico City kills nearly 10,000 people and causes heavy damage. The displaced residents, dissatisfied with the government's response to their situation, form grassroots organizations that will blossom into a full-fledged human rights and civic action movement during the late 1980s and 1990s. The country's problems are exacerbated by continuing accusations of electoral fraud against the PRI and the devastation caused in the Yucatan by a massive hurricane in 1988. December 17, 1992. President Carlos Salinas joins George H.W. Bush of the U.S. and Prime Minister Brian Mulroney of Canada in signing the North American Free Trade Agreement NAFTA, which goes into effect January 1, 1994. The agreement calls for a phasing out of the long-standing trade barriers between the three nations. Salinas pushes it through over the opposition of the media and the academic communities and of the leftist Partido Revolucionario Democrático PRD, which begins to win growing support among the electorate. Salinas' government is plagued by accusations of corruption, and in 1995 the former president is forced into exile. 1994. The latest PRI candidate, Ernesto Zedillo Ponce de Leon, is elected president and immediately faces a banking crisis when the value of the Mexican peso plunges on international markets. The United States loans Mexico $20 billion, which, along with a plan of economic austerity, helps stabilize its currency. Mexico today. 1997. The corruption-plagued PRI suffers a shocking defeat, losing the mayoralty of Mexico City, also known as the Distrito Federal, or DF, to PRD candidate Cuauhtémoc Cárdenas, son of former President Lázaro Cárdenas, by an overwhelming margin. 2000. Vicente Fox, of the opposition Partido de Acción Nacional PAN, wins election to the Mexican presidency, ending more than 70 years of PRI rule. Parliamentary elections also see the PAN emerge victorious, beating the PRI by a slight margin. A former Coca-Cola executive, Fox enters office as a conservative reformer, focusing his early efforts on improving trade relations with the United States, calming civil unrest in areas such as Chiapas, and reducing corruption, crime and drug trafficking. Fox also strives to improve the status of millions of illegal Mexican immigrants living in the United States, but his efforts stall after the terrorist attacks of September 11, 2001. With reforms slowing and his opponents gaining ground, Fox also faces large-scale protests by farmers frustrated with the inequalities of the NAFTA system. Subscribe to the channel and evaluate the video in the comments. You can also watch other interesting videos on my channel.